Sonoma Technology, who were our collaborators in the study. So, and then in the home intensive component, we conducted this between February 2002 to February 2003. And during the panel studies, when the child was in the panel study, a subset, up to 5 homes, there'd be maybe 50 children in a panel, but 5 of those would have these samplers inside and outside their homes, and we would sample on 5 days during that 2-week period. So we have 113 sets of data because we revisited some of the homes a couple of times. And this is the little toy we put in the R2D2 or whatever that we put into everybody's homes that agreed to do this, if you choose to agree. And we sampled for a large range of materials, including a lot of particulate matter, PAHs, the composition of PAHs, PM10, PM2.5, endotoxin, pollen grains, fungal spores. There's a nephelometer. It's a complicated device that was cleverly designed by participants in the study. This is a picture of one place where we did duplicate sampling in the backyard. But in each home, we would have one outdoor and one indoor. Here we happen to have a duplicate. And this is one that was indoors. These were carefully designed to be quiet, so they didn't make any more noise than an aquarium pump. And this just gives you a sense of the distribution of the participants in the FACES study. And the orange dots are the homes of the people where we did the home intensive sampling. So you can see this spatial distribution there. Okay, so just to remind you, we have the central site that went for the entire 8 years of the study, that collected the data every single day, hourly and daily data. We have the trailers, which went for 14 months, and the home intensive that went for that same mostly overlapping period for a year, that gives us spatial information about the distribution of the pollutants. And then we have the panel studies that give us information about that specific home. Another way to look at these data are to say we have the outdoor samples at the central site, at the schools and the homes, and then we have indoor samples at the homes, both from the home intensive matching the outdoor samples, and then the panels that we have at all the homes. Okay, so we have the daily data from the central site, so we can tell every day for all those children who lived on the top of that building what their exposures were if they didn't leave. Other than that, we have to make some assumptions about spatial variability, and that was the next challenge. We got to the temporal problem. So the spatial aspect between the central site and those other areas, we were going to model and develop models for that. And we also wanted to use the indoor-outdoor relationships of the samplers at the homes to understand those relationships, as well as the time activity. I'm not going to spend any time on this. I'll just test you this after dinner. But these are some of the continuous sampling devices, measurements that were being made as part of this study. And these are some of the integrated, that, for instance, collected on a filter in a 24-hour average rather than minute and hourly data. Okay, so and recall that we're doing this for a wide range of pollutants. Now I'm going to turn and just talk about the PAHs, all right? And why are we doing PAHs? Well, for a variety of reasons. One is that there are data that tell us that PAHs, specifically phenanthrene or diesel exhaust particles, both of those in different experiments, have been associated with the increased allergic antibody reactions, IgE reactions, and increased cytokine production, again from earlier, one of the earlier talks. And people exposed, that's in human cells, and people exposed to them can have, in their nose, actually have increased cytokine production in 18 hours later in their nose. So there's a good reason to hypothesize that these are very important in asthma. And the PAHs, as you have heard, are products of combustion. So they come from cars and trucks, they come from wood burning, they come from cooking, a variety of things. So this is just another thing for you to study quickly to be tested on, but this is these, PAH is polycyclic, many rings, all right? They have many rings, right? And you'll see some have 2 rings, well, one has 2 rings, and then there are 3 rings and 4 rings and 5 rings here. I think there's even a 6th ring. So this is basically, these are the compounds that we actually targeted to look at. And we looked at these compounds in a variety of ways. We measured them in a variety of ways. So we think of these as having localized sources rather than being regional. And so we need a lot of samples to begin to understand what's going on. So we collected the data on PAHs in 3 different ways. One is we collected on filters in which we impregnated with XAD resin, which would then collect both particle phase and vapor phase PAHs. The smaller PAHs can be in the vapor phase. We collected both, and that's what we used in the homes primarily. So the home data were just filters that collected both particle and vapor phase, and then we would analyze those samples for these individual PAHs, and then we could sum them up in different ways. And then we also developed a method of using filters and denuders so we could get both, we could distinguish between vapor phase and particle phase of these, and we used those at the central site, at the super site, and at the schools and the trailers. And finally, at the super site and the trailers and the schools, we actually had the continuous monitor, the EchoCam or the PASS 2000, which gave us hourly average particle phase, particle bound PAH data. So this is the ChemComb where we had 3 honeycomb denuders in series and then 3 filters, all with XAD as the absorbent for these. So going back to one of my earlier charts, what I tried to do is lay out here what we did. We had the hourly, at the central site, we had the primary thing is the hourly data with the EchoChem, and then, this is hard without being able to point to. And we also had the filters only, and we had the ChemCombs. Similarly at the schools, the vans. And then in the homes, we had just the filters. And just to say, we have multiple funders, which I'll point out at the end, but the EchoChem data was funded by the California Air Resources Board, who started the whole study, helped get the whole study off the ground. The US EPA provided the funding for us to add PAHs, which were not an agent we originally were able to fund just due to lack of resources. We were able to add those to the study. And then later we got money from, in addition, from the Mickey Leland National Urban Air Toxics to look at those samples. So let's first look at the temporal variability. So this is based on the hourly and daily data on the PAHs at the central site. And there's kind of a pattern here. This is 7 years of data. So our 6.5 years of data. And it's higher in the winter, so you can guess where the winters are. And actually, I think what's nice is you also might notice that there's a decline going on here, which might relate to some of the actions of your local air resources boards. You might have something to say to them. But in this way, we're able to capture the variability from day to day and through the seasons of the PAH levels. But you can see that it really is quite a bit higher in the winter than in the summer. And this is looking at just one of the PAHs we've examined on the filters, benzoate pyrene, which is a known carcinogen. And you can see, we actually have just from September to February. And so you can see the levels are very low in the summer, and they get much higher come the winter through time. The other thing you might notice here is that we have the central site data, and then we have the 2 trailer datas, and on any one day, there's some variability in that concentration. They don't all show the same concentration. So right here we can see there's spatial variability as well. This is looking at, on one day in Fresno, the 16 PAHs that we were looking at, the 15 of them, the PAHs we were looking at, just how much what was their concentrations in nanograms per cubic meter. And it's quite clear that phenanthrene, but naphthalene is actually the highest. It's off the scale, so it's not on this graph. But the highest after naphthalene is phenanthrene, which is again what has been tested and has had some effects in some toxicology studies. So this is particularly important, looking at that. We also compare the hourly sampler, the EchoChem, with the filter data, and we looked at the 3 lines represent whether we were plotting versus 2 just 5 and 6 ring PAHs, 4, 5, and 6 ring PAHs, or 3, 4, and 5, 6 rings. We ended up eventually using 4, 5, and 6 rings, which had an R-squared of 0.87, which we thought was pretty good as a comparison to this. So we can actually combine the data from the filters and the EchoChem. Again, this is the map looking at the spatial distribution of both the participants in the phases study and in particular where we have the filter data. We had about 500 samples outdoors of the homes of the children. In addition, we had blanks and quality control samples. So again, on any one day,